Roger Stone here. Every day you wait, your money loses value, but gold and silver don't follow those same rules. American Sovereign Bullion gives you access to a nationwide wholesaler network, helping you secure aggressive pricing on real physical metals. Call 844-272-2428 now to get your free gold and silver guide to learn how to protect your wealth with physical gold and silver, delivered right to your door or with a gold IRA. Visit asbgold.com. That's asbgold.com for your free gold and silver guide today.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the week that was here on WABC 77 on your dial. And it's David Patterson here with Jake Novak. They call this show The Left versus the Right. But there's so many interesting things going on this week that it's hard to really... it's hard to assess them as being left or right. And probably the most memorable and dynamic event that occurred this particular week occurred, I believe, on Thursday, right, Jake? And that's when
might have been Tuesday.
Might have been Tuesday
or Monday. It was early in the week. Let's save ourselves and say it was early in the week.
Yeah, now we don't have to cover the other days. Right. So, would you like to weigh in and discuss what a momentum changing, and at the same time, perhaps it could be, to the surprise of many, an invitation for more participation in politics and voting and what the candidates stand for, rather than now you just call the other side demons and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one thing. First of all, some of my best friends are humans, and I believe that human capital is the biggest plus, and lack of using it is the biggest minus in our American economy. We talked a little bit about that last week,
right,
with Ken Griffin saying that just about everyone who graduates high school, let alone doesn't graduate from high school, he can't even hire as a receptionist. That said, the sky's the limit in these people's potential, everyone's potential. And I think that this redistricting ruling by the Supreme Court, which is being denigrated as some kind of racist thing, where they've decided that race is not a legal criteria to create congressional districts, has the potential to be possibly one of the most economically positive moments in American history. I think this could unleash the human capital of millions of people who have been literally and figuratively ghettoized, literally and figuratively put under the thumb of politicians with almost no accountability, which is always bad for economics. And I'm very excited about this. Yes, I'm excited about it on a political level as well, because I think that actually the way that we've been doing districting with racial criteria has really hurt the black community, badly so. It's kept them from being the swing votes in more racially mixed districts. And when you're a swing voter, boy, do the politicians love you.
People like to talk to you.
Yeah, they like to talk to you, and they serve you better. It's the way it goes. By the way, billionaires in this country actually are a swing vote. You might think they're all Democrats. You might think they're all Republicans. No, they're pretty much split down the middle. And yes, they would get the attention of politicians because of their money. But on top of that, they're also a swing vote. You can't tell me that most billionaires are one party or the other in this country, because they aren't. And everyone else should enjoy that same kind of attention. And I can't tell you how much I think the black community especially, we're really only talking about that minority here, because that's really the only major gerrymandered racial connection.
Right.
I think that the black community in this country has had its economic viability and vitality sapped to hell by these gerrymandered districts that create politicians who know they don't ever have to do a darn thing to get reelected, which means they're not out there hustling, trying to get new businesses and new opportunities, and on down the line. And
the black vote helped to create that margin that they didn't have to worry about what would happen on election day.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things that's just, it breaks my heart. I kind of, my political, I was always interested in politics. I'm sure no one's surprised by that. I was always interested in it as a little kid. But my first real economic participation is I was an intern for 3 summers in Congressman Floyd Flake's office. He was my congressman from Far Rockaway, mostly Jamaica, but Far Rockaway is part of his district.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to disclose what years?
Yes. Summers of 87, 88, and 89.
Wow.
So those 3 summers, my last summer of my high school before going into senior year, and then the first 2 summers after college.
Yeah, because he got elected in 1986.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he was really a maverick in a sense, because he had a completely different view of how to create economic development than others, and a better point of view of that. But at the same time, a real gentleman.
He was an amazing person, a great intellect as well. We're talking about, like you said, he's alive and well and still running that church, the Allen AME Church in Jamaica, which has its own housing, has its own school.
It's amazing.
He is the best version. He is a black Hasidic rabbi, just like the great Hasidic rabbis creating their own communities. He's like that. I don't know if he followed that model on purpose or not. But, it's funny. The two greatest examples of what Hasidic rabbis are all about in our American culture aren't even Jewish. Rod Steiger and his portrayal of the Rebbe in the Chosen movie. Rod Steiger was not a Jewish man. That is the best portrayal of a Hasidic rabbi ever on film, stage, screen, period. And Floyd Flake actually doing it. But all kidding aside, his goal for the 3 terms he said, he could have been in Congress forever. He wasn't going to get ousted.
Yeah.
His goal was to bring real banking to his district. Jamaica had a bunch of just did not have like literal decent banking opportunities.
They just had those check cashing places.
Yeah. And when you go, if you take the Long Island Railroad and you go by the Jamaica Station and you're looking at some of those those shopping centers, that's Floyd Flake. Floyd Flake did that and all that kind of stuff. But that took someone who was really hustling for his district. He decided to step down after 3 terms because he felt that he had accomplished what he was going to accomplish. But you know what? I think he also realized that fire under his belly, to really get into fire in his belly to get going, would probably have dissipated after a while, especially since he didn't really have to work hard to get reelected. That's what these gerrymandered districts do. They also create almost like an economic no-go zone. They basically tell everybody, well, they've clearly made this to win an election, not to create a real vibrant economic continuity of a community. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity specifically for the black community. We know that they have a lot of human capital. We know there's a lot of money in this community, and it has been cordoned off so that we can protect these career politicians who have very little impetus to do much for their communities. Now that will be off the table. I'm hoping that every state that does this gets sued by the Justice Department to redistrict. And I think this is a fantastic economic story. And I feel sorry for people, especially within the black community or on the left in general, who don't see this. But, their hatred makes them stupid. So what can I tell you?
Well, if you were looking for unique points of view, if you were looking for perhaps a point of view that you never even heard before, you're at the right place here at 77 WABC. And Jake has expanded on that so far in this show. And let's see if he can do a little better, because now the issue, really right now of the redistricting is a very interesting issue, because it could have been perceived to be reinstating race as a factor.
Yeah.
But these days, it's really hard to say that. And not only that, but these days, people don't really live on top of each other like they used to, even in larger neighborhoods. It's hard to even figure out where the vote is sometime. So it'll be interesting to see how, well, first of all, I don't know any action that can be taken against it because the Supreme Court ruled.
Yeah, well, one of the things, you're doing the same thing I was doing several years ago, thinking like, wait a minute, how do we really do this fairly? We all agree it's not. And the answer I come up with every time, and I don't know if we mentioned this last week or not, but get realtors. I want experienced realtors with at least 10 years experience. Nobody knows neighborhoods where they really begin and end like a realtor. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And I guess in some of the areas that aren't heavily, residential, where there isn't a lot of residential sales of private homes, you could get some of the commercial real estate people who know. They know where the neighborhoods begin and end. They know what areas are residential, what areas are commercial. They know what areas are safer. They know what areas are, and they know everyone's income. they know everybody's income. So again, I'm not talking about someone who's been a realtor for a couple of years and only deals with their neighborhood. I'm talking about some of these people who have had that kind of heavy experience. Every state has them. And they would be great people to decide this kind of thing. But, to me, this is just the sad thing about our country is that we seem to be interested until this decision in balkanizing the United States. And I don't want the signature signs of certain black communities and their culture and their history. I don't want those erased. I don't want gentrification everywhere. Don't get me wrong. I'm not looking for that. And I don't think that would happen necessarily. With all the Harlem Renaissance that's gone on thanks to people like Jack Kemp and working with Charlie Rangel and stuff like that, Harlem still looks like Harlem to me. I'm sorry. And it's a lot better than it was when I was a kid. I don't think that people go into Harlem thinking, boy, this is just like another yuppie white neighborhood. I don't think people do that today. I think that there's a lot to be preserved, but at the same time, if you are a national chain, if you're a Starbucks and somebody you have that kind of money, why would you go into one of these districts where you're going to get shaken down by every Tom, Dick, and Harry, where the politician there isn't going to give you any concessions, and on down the line? It's just like, why? And now there won't be such a map for them to look at and say, oh, I don't want to go here. And that'd be nice. That'd be really wonderful.
You really struck a chord, Jake. I was walking on 119th Street in Harlem, and I was going to turn and go down to 116th to this restaurant. And I thought to myself, when I went to Columbia, and kind of walked around the neighborhood, it pretty much looks the same now as it did then, the Harlem part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that is indications that something had to change, something had to be turned around. And some of the things that people think you absolutely need, maybe you don't need them. Maybe they will draw maps that are consistent with the population and not based on race or religion or some other national origin. It will be just interesting to see how this plays out.
I thought that the 1989 and then the 1993 mayoral elections in this city were just as much as a trigger to the resurgence that we had in the years after than the fact that Giuliani won, and then we brought in police commissioners and everything else like that. The fact we had a very contested 1989 Democrat primary, if you remember, it was like
Yes.
really crowded field.
Absolutely.
Dinkins, Koch was running again. Dinkins, we had the guy who was running the MTA for years, and he recently passed away.
Ravitch.
Yeah, Richard Ravitch, who was
He was my lieutenant governor, by the way.
Yeah, I voted for him.
I think we went through that one time.
Yeah. No, I voted for him because I remember thinking when I came to New York in 1981, the subways were a lot worse than they are now. And it may not be because of him, but I can tell you if it had been worse, we would have blamed him. So I actually voted for him in the primary. It was a crowded field. And there were other people too. And all I can tell you is that kind of competition created a better situation. It was a very close mayor's race. Dinkins won.
And the turnout was incredible for a primary.
Yeah. And then 4 years later, Giuliani won by a hair. But I think that the competition, the old idea that it was just going to be a rubber stamp, as long as the incumbents want to run again, it's just going to be the same guys. That got erased, and it created a competitive political culture in this city and in the state for a little while. We got it again in 94 when Pataki ran and won, and back again then in 98 again. And that's what really leads to healthy, not only political outcomes, but economic outcomes. Understand these things are, I don't understand why people don't understand. These things are married. They're together with. If you don't have people hustling for a political office, your chances of getting economic growth are minimal. So we want competition. We want real competition. Maybe we did get it with this last mayoral election primary. Maybe we're at the beginning of something good, despite the result, which I didn't like at all, of Mamdani winning. Maybe this has raised everyone's awareness like back in 1989. I'm hoping.
Just a thought about that period of time. In 1993, when Dinkins lost, there's something that I knew about him because I had worked for him in a couple of his failed borough president campaigns. And then, of course, he wins in 89. Dinkins, as much as any other human being I ever met, really believed in a strict equality. In other words, you just judge people by, their actions, their thoughts, what they've done for society, and not what they look like or what they said, or that kind of thing. And unfortunately for David, I think he was a little bit ahead of the rest of the world. But so he campaigned that way. And he, in other words, at campaigns, you go to the places where you know they're going to vote for you. He'd go to the places where he knew they weren't going to vote for him and tried to persuade them. He wasn't able to do it to the extent that he could defeat Mayor Giuliani. But he did do it, I think, to his own satisfaction for what he thought politics should be. He was really almost an apolitical mayor because he wanted to help everybody. And I think that hasn't really sunk in, through the decades since then. But he was all right.
I wasn't obviously as much of a fan of his, but I was very well aware throughout his entire term that he was dealing with a New York City that was dealing with a twin problem of AIDS and crack.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the height of both had actually, thankfully, was over by the time he took office, but they were still very much working in tandem by the time he did take office, January 1st, 1990. You had a huge problem with both. The crack situation was why the homicide rate rose to that record level when he was the mayor. But the AIDS situation was also taxing the city's resources in many ways. It was a tough time. But at the same time, and then there was the beginnings of the recession when he was, by 1992, we were in recession.
Yeah.
So he had a bunch of things that were, in all fairness, still don't think he handled a number of things properly as mayor, but in all fairness, he had a tougher playing field than the people he was, who sandwiched him, both Koch and Giuliani, I think. I
think that's right. And but I think you're right. It kind of paved the way for a greater extent to which the mayor, who of course Giuliani was there. He won in 89 and 93, and then Bloomberg eventually comes in, and you couldn't get rid of him. He was there forever.
Yeah, 3 terms. It's one of those things where, again, though, that and you could, again, while as much as I think that de Blasio and Eric Adams and now Mamdani are very much responsible for our problems growing in the city, that last thing you said, you couldn't get rid of him. We had a 3-term mayor in Bloomberg, and by the 3rd term, that was dangerous. You have someone who doesn't really have to do much better. Now, he was already eyeing a presidential campaign, which I knew was going to fail from day one. I wrote an editorial for CNBC about how he was just basically giving the Democrats a ton of money. It was a ridiculously poor campaign. So that was a little bit better, but still, if you create politicians with no fear of losing their office, you will suffer in more ways than politically. You will mostly suffer economically. And that is exactly what you have in these gerrymandered black districts. You have people, you look at some of these districts, Maxine Waters, for all of her hyperbole and all of her yelling, her district is no better than it was the day she walked in there, and that's inexcusable. She has a lot of seniority. They should have a lot more wealth showering down on that district. But why should she bother? And she doesn't. It's like what I always say when in the old days before they started to franchise out all the concessions at all the baseball stadiums. And we'd be standing at line at Yankee Stadium and the line wasn't moving and we were missing innings and people next to me are complaining. And every once in a while I would be like the guy in the Progressive ads and be more like my parents. And I would turn to the guy and say well, why would the line move faster? Is the person selling you the hot dog at the end going to get a bonus if he sells you? No, he's not.
Yes.
So when they franchise these out to these people needing to basically kill what they eat, they had to eat what they kill. They had to sell the most hot dogs to make their line go fastest. Otherwise, they'd go to another concession. That's when you started getting faster moving lines at the stadiums. And so honestly, if there's no incentive to do better, no one's going to do better. End of story.
Well, we're going to try to do better right after we take a break and hear from our sponsors here on The Left versus the Right, WABC. And you're with Jake Novak and David Patterson. And when we come back, we'll tackle the next group of issues, or maybe we won't. Anyway, we'll be right back.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Why is the middle class shrinking? Why are people facing an affordability crisis while marginalized individuals called informals grow in numbers? Join me as I travel the world, speaking with people living in invisibility, the leaders working to solve it, and uncovering the hard truths shaping our economy and daily reality.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back. The one and only Jake Novak joining myself, David Patterson, here on the left versus the right. And, you know, we beat up on a few people in the first session, and we plan on beating up on a few people in the second session. And, Jake, mayors have gone out of their way to be held in high esteem by the Jewish community, Jewish business leaders, just people who live here, the arts, the whole thing. And every mayor has, some more than others, but certainly there was never any feeling that any of the mayors were antagonistic toward the community. Now you have a flotilla with a mayor on it who seems to want to find every particular reason to have problems with that community. And then there's always some general statement, but all people are equal, something like that. It means nothing. And just wanted to check in with you about where's Mamdani going with this? And by the way, where does he think he can get to going with this?
Well, I mean, there's two things that have happened just in the last few weeks that have been so out of character for any mayor, certainly a successful mayor, that Mamdani has done. First off, as we talked about it last week, the specific mentioning of one person in New York, Ken Griffin, and his expensive penthouse, and naming him by name, doing a video down on the street below his penthouse. You know, if you're a mayor of a city, even if you do feel that there are some bad people in your city, unless they're convicted criminals or should be convicted criminals, you don't want to even talk about them as a group, and you shouldn't name them by name, even anyway, unless they've already been convicted.
I mean, especially with these days, where since we were on the air last week, just hours after we went off, there was the shooting at the hotel.
Yeah, the demon, which is certainly an offshoot of the demonization of Donald Trump and that administration. It's a big part of it. I don't think that demonization of people gets someone to become violent who otherwise wasn't. I think it creates an excuse for people who already were violent to believe this is the go time. That's what I think it does. A slight variation. I know it doesn't really matter in the moral court of law. It's immoral either way. But I think it's important for people to understand that you're not going to stop an already violent person from being violent, but you can stop that violent person from actually acting on their violence. That to me is more important. So he did that, the mayors should be out there every time they're on camera promoting the city, even if it's a little bit kitschy. New York's the greatest place for bagels and for hot dogs.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
It. Just some of it can be kitschy, some of it can be much more.
But the same kitschy tone, that you just demonstrated was the tone that he used about we're going to tax the rich. It was like a. It was
like a snotty 17-year-old girl. I mean, it was really a little scary. You know, he looked a little demonic in that video. He just did. I'm sorry. It looked really kind of scary. So there was that, and then he decides to wade into international politics by talking about how this flotilla, which is just made to make things very difficult for Israel. This group of activists, this has been a ploy that people have been using for years. They try to sail a bunch of ships into Gaza to try to embarrass the Israeli government, to try to cause a problem. The Israelis told them, don't do this. You're in international waters. This is a time of war in the region. They did it anyway, and they arrested them. And then the mayor decides to make a big deal out of it. There may have been some New Yorkers on these ships. That's he says. I don't know about that. Either way, why would he wade into that? It's not the kind of, you want to have a positive connotation when you hear from your mayor. You want to hear him about him promoting the city. You want to hear about him promoting something. And this is just something he should not be wading into. But it's such a dichotomy from every mayor before him would go out of their way to show support for Israel. He's going way out of his way to show hatred for Israel. And there's not one person in America or in this city who would have said after that happened, boy, I wish the mayor had tweeted about the flotilla. Like, no one wants that. No one's asking for that. Even the biggest haters of Israel aren't demanding that he do that. They want him to do something more significant, sadly. But why would he do that other than basically he doesn't care about being reelected, and he certainly doesn't seem to care about the city?
Well, one side note, Jake, the SSGU, the snotty 17-year-old girls union, has sent a couple of emails, and they feel that you have improperly described the young women of that ilk. Yeah,
well, they control the writers' room in SNL and have for quite some time. So I'm sorry, I don't want to fool around with you. I mean, you'll do a sketch about me next week. But I remember a funny play on words that I read in the New York Times about 25 years ago. And they were talking about the demographic changes in New York City. And they made the point that where in the past, New York City mayoral candidates, whether they were Jewish or not, would have to go to the local deli to try to do some campaigning. And now, because of the demographic change, they may actually have to go to the city of New Delhi to do some campaigning. And I was okay with that. But this is a mayor who's not looking to get the Indian American community. He seems to be looking for the hating American community, whatever background they may have, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're whatever other nationality or racial background. He's looking to play on the fears and the snottiness. And he's trying to become the mayor of resentment and hate. And no matter how poor a job a mayor does of trying to promote the positive aspects of New York City, that's what they should be trying to do. I remember also about 20 years ago, no more than that. This was about also 25, 30 years ago. Continental Airlines did a bus ad in New York about how they had a lot of flights leaving New York. So the ad was, "Welcome to New York, tourists. Now get out." It was a joke. The idea was, hey, if you're here in New York, you might want to get up. And Giuliani worked very hard to get those ads down. He was like, "This is not good. I don't want tourists coming to New York City seeing this kind of thing. They may not know it's a joke."
What his mission was.
Yeah. And what a difference! Now we have a mayor who's the one telling people to get out. I mean, he's the one saying it. It's just so incredibly shocking to see. And I know that 25, 30 years is a long time, but I'm sorry. There should never be a point where you go from a mayor who's worried that people will misunderstand and think that we're not being welcoming here to having a mayor who can't wait to tell you how not welcome you are. That, I don't care, 330, 300, 3,000 years is too short a time for that kind of a change.
Well, that compels me to ask you this. How did he get elected?
Well, I think, I don't have any doubt why he was elected.
You don't?
No, this was an entire election, and this was something that his fellow candidates, first of all, the people competing with him, his opponents, helped him win. Scott Stringer alone with those commercials about calling Trump a schmuck made it clear to everyone, which we already knew already, which that the entire Democratic primary was who hates Trump the most? Who's going to anger Trump the most? People literally went to the polls thinking, I hate Trump, because that's the number one, mental illness in this country, and it's very concentrated in the city. Who can I vote for that will express my hatred of Trump the most? And there was no question it was Zohran Mamdani from day one. There was nobody who Trump would dislike more than Zohran Mamdani. And his fellow candidate, his opponents, I should say, made it clear that they were okay with that messaging. In there, honestly, you're voting for your mayor based on who you hate as president? Makes no sense. But like I said earlier, Governor, hate makes you stupid. If they always talk about crimes of passion and love, I think that love keeps you a lot smarter than hate does. Hate really rots your brain out a lot more than love does. And I'm not saying that just because I'm some kind of hippie. Because believe me, I am. No, I'm really not. But we got a lava lamp here. But honestly, hate makes you stupid. And hate for Donald Trump was the number one factor for people who voted for Zohran Mamdani. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not being honest with you. And I actually think that most of the people who voted for Zohran Mamdani would actually admit that. I don't think I'd have a hard time getting it out of them. And
I think the president himself understood that when he was running in 2024. And I think that that in some ways has been a positive for him, as opposed to a negative, that when these things happen, blows it off with one line. These people, they hate America. Period. Then he walks away. That's how you deal. That's how you deal with that kind of thing. But it is going to be interesting, as we move forward, to see if the mayor is going to stay that way, or is he what's the end game?
Well, I don't think he has any realistic chances of any real other significant office. That's not only because he's Zohran Mamdani. That's because the mayor's office, being the mayor of the city, is tried and true and historically proven to be a stopping the end of your political career. You're not going to run and win for any other significant office. It's not going to happen. You maybe could win for council somewhere, but doesn't matter. Republican, Democrat, liberal, more traditional, doesn't matter. And that's been true for the greatest mayor the city ever had, Fiorello LaGuardia. They tried to put him on a horse and see in a special in a famous pre-campaign teaser that they put out, and it looked ridiculous. It went for John Lindsay, who also entertained the idea of running for president for a while. De Blasio, certainly Rudy Giuliani. These people, it's a killer. To be the mayor of the city means that's where you're going to end your effective political career, and that's for a lot of people that would be a dream. They love the city, and that's what they want to do. So I don't think he's going anywhere else. He may not realize that yet. But that's also dangerous. We were just talking about how dangerous it is when you don't have to worry about keeping your office, or you don't have higher aspirations that you can realistically go for. So I think his end game is to do much more damage every single month he's in office, because he has nowhere else to go, and he'll either get reelected mayor or not. But after this, he's not going to be ever elected to anything ever again.
I agree. I would think that would be the case, unless he has some incredible, collision of faith with the gods, where he starts to recognize that it is better to treat other human beings like human beings and not go and stand in front of their houses and risk their lives by you taking a picture, chiding them right on the street below. So I think you're right there. Michael Bloomberg certainly was, I think, the mayor who probably figured it out compared to all the other mayors. And his way of doing it was to give the city council members an extra 4 years. And while you're at it, I'll take 4 as well. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but he too. I mean, I don't know exactly why he ran for president, other than, he had the extra money anyway. Yeah. All the billionaires of his class doubled and tripled their money over the last 30 years. So why not? More than that, actually. Whether it was just a let's gang up on Trump kind of thing, I don't know. He had such an ineffective campaign for president. It was over so quickly. Again, maybe it was a way to pay off some of his people who had worked in the office for mayor, and it was a way for them to get like a pension plan, a bigger payday as campaign people. There's a lot of possibilities. Money has something to do with it. That's
what surprised me was how poor his performances were in the debates, how some other candidates who didn't belong on a stage with Michael Bloomberg managed to show him up and, really kind of, as they say, socked it to him, and he didn't flinch. But you knew then he wasn't long for this race.
He's also another one of those people who I don't think he hated campaigning, but he didn't really love it. You had to be a Bill Clinton type of I like getting out there, shaking the hands, and being out there with the people kind of campaigner to win. President Trump, I don't know if he's exactly that kind of, but he certainly liked drawing those crowds and speaking to those crowds, and he gave them the show that they wanted. And anyone who didn't realize he was going to win the election after several months of him selling out arenas during the primary process, which no one had done. It took me until May of 2016 to figure it out, and I wrote an editorial about it, and I still am the only I remain the only mainstream fully employed journalist in the mainstream media who predicted he was going to win, and no one else joined me in that. There were lots of people who were part-time and contributors who did, but nothing like, I actually had a job writing on it. But honestly, you got to love it. You have to at least, or be so good at fooling people into thinking that you love it. I think Richard Nixon was a little bit on the fence about that, but did enjoy some campaigning. I don't think Mike Bloomberg really wanted to go out and visit every State of the Union and press the flesh and do it. That's not what he was interested in, and it shows. It shows you have to really love it. Donald Trump is a pugnacious individual. He likes slugging it out with people, and that's a motivator. That'll get you out on the campaign trail and get you to speak at rallies for an hour. That'll do it.
Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some things that are happening as we speak. Just the gas prices are back up. And the Straits of Hormuz is closed, and people are trying to figure out where to go this summer. It's going to cost more money to, fill up the tank in your car to go places. And now the supermarkets, when you come out of the supermarket, you spend the same money that you'd spend if you went and ate at a restaurant. They used to say people would bring their money in their pockets to the supermarket and take their what they bought home in bags. Now they bring bags of money to the supermarket and take the food home in their pockets.
Yeah, well, we're not quite at Weimar Germany era hyperinflation. Thank God.
Not yet.
No, we're not. And gas prices are still lower than they were at the height of the Biden administration. But look, you can't whistle past the graveyard, and I don't think anybody really is. There's no one saying, "Oh, don't worry about gas prices." We're saying, I think the most optimistic among us are saying that they will drop relatively quickly when this situation is resolved in Iran. But I think that we've learned over the last week or so that there is no real deal that can be made with this regime. Now, honestly, if I were the Trump administration, I would be preparing, and apparently this is the case, we are reading about this now, a final blow against this regime, and to spend some time preparing for creating some kind of group that can take over their oil assets as soon as possible. Which probably won't be a lot. It won't take much because the worker bees who work the drills and work the refineries, they'll just do what they're told. They're not radicals. So I think that is our best hope right now. I wish this weren't the case. I wish these people would surrender and we could have a USS Missouri on the deck moment where they sign a surrender like the Japanese did. But it's not happening. These people will go to the ends. They've been waiting for this their whole lives, and they will die before they surrender. Sad.
You want to know what I think?
Yeah.
You have to wait a couple of minutes because we're going to take a break right now to hear from our sponsors here on WABC 77, The Left versus the Right, on this Saturday afternoon, May the 2nd. And we are really excited about something, but we'll tell you what it is when we get back.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back with the Left versus the Right. I'm David Patterson along with Jake Novak. Jake Novak compared himself right before we came back on to Ted Baxter.
I do a very good Ted Baxter impersonation.
Oh, absolutely.
I wish your name was Lou. Lou!
Yes, Mary. So the illustrious congressperson from Minnesota was making a speech. This did not happen in the past few days. It happened a couple of months ago. And I guess it just kind of slipped through the cracks. Nobody noticed it. But it was brought to our attention on Thursday by John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. And on that show, they played this tape where she is talking about events. And she said, if I could paraphrase, that it wasn't like that during World War XI. Because she saw the Roman numeral 2 and read it as an 11.
This is why it's good to be a sports fan.
Yes,
because
exactly.
as a very young kid, because of the Super Bowls using Roman numerals,
you learned all.
I already knew. And I remember somebody in second grade. I was in second grade from September of 77. I wasn't left back. From 77 until June of 78. I remember somebody making that mistake in second grade, and we were laughing at him. One of the things that I've always very much held on to very strongly is when it comes to stupid things or things that are offensive that a politician says or any public figure, never chalk up to evil, which is much more likely to be the result of stupidity. This is not an educated person, obviously, and you don't have to always be very formally educated to be a smart person. We've got people on this channel who didn't get finish high school who are smarter than a heck of a lot of the rest of us. So it's not necessarily about that. But in this case, this is a woman who's incredibly ignorant. And what can I tell you? The reason I was doing the Ted Baxter thing is because, listen, Governor, I worked in local news for 6 years, all over the country, and then finally here in New York. And when I can tell you some of the things that some of the anchor people I worked with said on the air, one of them referred to the city of Hanoi, Vietnam. Hanoi, Vietnam.
Yeah, North Vietnam.
I had one person talking about an airplane crash and how there was debris on the ground. I was like, is debris the opposite of getting circumcised? Because that was something during the Greek Hellenistic period. I was like, I mean, honestly, it's just one of those things where, look, you got to be very careful about that kind of stuff because everyone has a blind spot. The smartest people in the world sometimes will mispronounce a word or not know something, especially, by the way, really smart people who learn from reading only. Sometimes when someone mispronounces something, it's because they've read so much and they're so well read and they haven't actually had it spoon-fed to them by somebody else that they get it wrong. So sometimes it actually can be an indication of smarts. But World War XI, I mean, geez, did I miss 9 world wars? Clearly, I've been asleep. I hope not. I mean, but in her case, it's not that. And, can we at least get really well-educated people on the other side of the fence or people who are not our friends in Congress? I mean, and I don't even think Bernie Sanders, he gets away with being considered some kind of old egghead. He's not. Have you read his doctoral? I mean, the guy's a moron. He's really not well-educated. That's why he gets away with he's got that old man thing, and he seems like he's smart because he's old. But he's not. He's not very well educated, actually. He went to good schools, but it didn't get through his head.
Well, you see, that's kind of interesting because quite often when you take people who are in entertainment or news, something like that, and you put them someplace else, you get to learn a little more about them. And I've kind of seen it where, they'll get one of the anchors to come and speak at some event someplace. And once you get the anchor out from behind the desk, they have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah. It's that sort of thing that happens. And look, it was funny. And she probably could have helped herself a little bit if she even stood up and laughed at it herself.
Right.
But she wouldn't think to do that if we were in the year 2095.
No.
But I just thought it was funny, and of course a lot of our listeners were working at the time when it first got played, so I wanted to give them a chance to hear it. But it does certainly open a little door into the mindset of where people who are making very major decisions are not totally prepared to do so.
Well, I also think that there's something, and this is funny that you mentioned people in the entertainment industry, because I think that people who are entertainers and people who are politicians have one thing scary that's in common that I think hurts their mental acuity, and that is they're constantly reading other people's words for them, whether it's on a teleprompter or in a speech. And if I were ever a huge star, or if I were ever a elected politician.
No, Jake, you are emerging right in front of me. I used to walk down the street and they say, "Oh, who's that other guy on the show with you?" Now, Jake Novak. Could you arrange a lunch for the two of us? So,
somebody, I was at the New York Historical Society cafe yesterday, and somebody who looked very, very prominent and wealthy waved to me as I was walking out, and I just reflexively waved back at him, and I was sure I didn't know him, but he was definitely a very important person, so maybe he did know me. I don't know. But all kidding aside, I think that if you read other people's words for you without enough input of your own to make sure that you're in there and that you're part of the construction of the words you're reading, the more your brain, I think, rots.
And you're not part of the delivery.
Yeah, I think your brain rots. And one of the ways that I learned this was as a father of young children, and my children now are older, but when they were little, they used to like to watch some of those Disney Channel sitcoms. And I would watch with amazement because I had, my daughter's, incredible students, incredible test scores. I knew they were very smart, and obviously I'm biased. But I would see my two incredibly smart daughters, and we would watch these 5-year-olds on the Disney Channel delivering jokes quick and fast. And I thought to myself, there's no way these kids aren't geniuses. There's absolutely no way. So someone said, well, wait a minute, Jake, how can they all be geniuses? They all end up, most of them end up like such a mess. And I said, well, you could have the best brain in the world, but you start them early reading other people's words. You start them early being surrounded by sycophants. It's a great way to get stupid. And I think politicians the same way. Chuck Schumer used to be a smart guy. I don't find him intelligent. And that's not just because I don't agree with him politically. Don't chalk it up to that. I've been in the room with him. He sat next to me at my high school graduation 40 plus years ago, or almost 40 years ago, 38 years ago. And his mental acuity has declined greatly since his days of a Harvard student. I can promise you that. Same thing with Kirsten, Gillibrand. She used to be smart. Now she's too stupid to go in public. I mean, she's MIA. I would be MIA too if I had to say what she has to say, which is nothing. What can I say? I just think that it starts to rot your brain out.
Well, I wonder who to point somebody like that.
Well, the thing is, I mean, this is where your special abilities and disabilities, Governor, have I think helped you keep your brain sharp.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you can't just read off a teleprompter for the rest of your life, and it's probably a huge positive for you. I think it is, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting across from me. I thought about this before, even before we met. I actually thought about this. So honestly, I think that is a huge problem. In my days in TV, never used a teleprompter. And if I did, I wrote every word. Every word that was in there, I wrote it.
And now you're part of the delivery because you're not reading what someone else wrote. Yeah. You're reading what you wrote, which is maybe the best way to deliver a news story on TV.
You can lose yourself, And by the way, a lot of people on social media, especially after this White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting, were having a good old time finding news anchors saying a couple of years ago the opposite of what they're saying now. For example, about like Jimmy Kimmel. A bunch of news anchors 3 years ago saying that certain people should be canceled because they've stoked hatred or hate, and now they're saying the opposite about Jimmy Kimmel. Well, that's what happens. You also have you have no real memory of what you said yesterday when it's just someone else who's written up those words for you. Right. And also people like Jake Tapper, who got really caught with this, was comparing what he said in 2022 to just this week. They also don't have a good executive producer who's really watching the store for him. I mean, he should feel bad about whoever is running the store on his show. But ultimately, if you're reading other people's words, you're going to not only will you not get smarter, you're going to get dumber, but you're going to forget. You'll say the exact opposite thing not much long afterwards because it wasn't your words in the first place.
Now, this is fascinating. We're running out of time, but listen, when did you first think of that? Because I dare say, other than yourself, I've never heard anyone else give that as a reason why you get such poor performances from professionals and even comics.
Yeah. Well, I did kind of explain it. My daughters are 23 and 18. So I think I started watching some of these Disney Channel things with them probably 20 years ago. The sitcom, no, that was been too young. So let's say 18 years ago or so, when my older one was 5, and we're watching these other 5-year-olds on TV. And my 5-year-old daughter, I mean, she was incredibly verbal from the very beginning. She actually was singing before she was talking. But well before age 1, She was speaking very, very extensively. And it was always funny to see her talking to the boys in her preschool classes, because boys usually are a little bit slower with the verbal thing, and she'd just be talking up a storm and like right next to them, and they're like, ooh, and yet compared to her, these kids were still clearly well beyond. And I know they can retake the shot, and I know they can do some editing, but honestly, even at that age of 5, my daughter, it would take 18 hours to tape a half-hour sitcom with her, just like it would with anyone else. I mean, these kids who are doing this are brilliant. They're brilliant, brilliant kids. And I think we destroy them with all the other things that we know. The money, the sycophants surrounding you is also just as dangerous for your intellect. Right. You get a bunch of people kissing your butt all the time. That's another way to get stupid real fast. You got to be challenged and be worried about, how can I make an impression, a good impression with who I'm talking. If I don't have to worry about that, you're going to stop trying. But clearly these kids have tremendous intellect. And I think that a lifetime of reading other people's words, even if it's a childhood, is one of their biggest death sentences, actually. I think that maybe we could save some of these child actors if we brought them into the writer's room and they at least participated in it. I mean, I'd like to try to do something like that because, we got to do something about stage parents. We'll do another show about that one day.
Well, I think that's really the problem in many respects with education is that it's repetitive and the same thing gets taught to the class behind you. And after a while, the material is really not original anymore.
Well, I'm happy to say I know someone who's trying to fix that. There's an amazing school in East Northport, Long Island, called the Schoolhouse. I think it's K through 9 now. It keeps expanding. Woman who founded it, her name is Mimosa Jones. She was and she came from she was a screenwriter, Governor. She was a screenwriter on The West Wing, and she wrote other stuff. She was very successful. Chucked it all to start this school many years ago, and I visited many times. Linda McMahon visited, as Secretary of Education visited a few months ago, and I can tell you, nothing like that. I mean, the school, each classroom was like, I couldn't believe what was going on there. Quiet, but everyone working, a lot of individual work, and multiple ages in the same room. They were paired together. Those classes were formed based on certain abilities. They didn't have kids 70 years apart, but you could be in a room with a kid 3 years older.
Putting boys and girls in the same environment, they would take the boys with other boys that were a little bit ahead of them and put them together, and the girls, I would assume, separately, so we don't have to have an issue about gender in the classroom. Yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing place, and they keep getting bigger. And she created something for all the schools to use called the American Emergent Curriculum, which is interesting. I'm not really here to do necessarily an ad for them. I don't have to. It's fantastic. But I just wanted to let you know that, we're bemoaning something. I hate to only bemoan it and not mention that there are people who are really working on fixing that repetitive nature of the usual classroom. The everyone sitting and looking at someone standing in front of them. No wonder we all become addicts to TV. That's what we do when we're in school too. We sit placidly and look at somebody in front of the room talking at us. So there are some people working on this and understand exactly the structural problem. It's not just the woke curricula, and it's not just that's a problem too. But even if we had perfect curricula, if you're just having some teacher at the front of the room droning on and then repetitive stuff and we're all sitting at desks, that's not a great way to learn either. No, not at all. And you see, here on the left versus the right, you know where we're going to start, but you never know where we're going to end. I mean, that's been kind of an issue for me during years of just trying to see, particularly the educational system, try something different, do something different, and it's the same repetition as usual. And if you want to hear more repetition of the left versus the right, please come back and join us next week from 3 to 4. He's Jake Novak. I'm David Patterson, and we certainly enjoyed that you listened to the show today and invite you back next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
In this 25th anniversary year of September 11th, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation continues to honor America's heroes. Heroes like Fire Lieutenant Michael Wells, who was inspired by 9/11 to serve his community. After 14 dedicated years of service, he lost his battle with occupational cancer, leaving behind his wife, Katie, and their 3 children. Tunnel to Towers honored Lieutenant Wells by paying off the family's mortgage in recognition of his sacrifices. Donate $11 monthly and amplify your impact with a car or land donation. Go to T2T.org.